having watched the video. What I typically like to do is to get the ID sheet and work our way through it from the top left, each section at a time, and say, all right, does anybody have any questions from this section? And I think I'll go ahead and do that again. So, you guys have been having to watch video lectures, and a lot of information is coming at you just like it would be in class. And, sometimes you get some notes down on something, but you're thinking maybe I didn't get away with, maybe there's more to this. So, if we go back and look at that first section of IDs, says League of Three Emperors, 1905 Revolution, Sick Men of Europe, William II, Kruger Telegram, Bolsheviks, the Black Hand, and Franz Ferdinand. That's all. That reflects some of the immediate lead-ups, events, personalities that are leading to World War I. So do you have any questions about those IDs? Having watched the video lecture. Can't hear anybody. Anybody talking?
I don't think so. I'm not. Can you hear me?
Yep. Who's this? Kenny? No, it's Michael. What's your question, Michael?
I didn't have one. I was just letting you know it was silence.
You actually heard me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool enough.
Yeah, I don't think I have a question with those.
Okay. So then we get into the next section, which actually has to do with the war itself. Everything from the von Schlieffen Plan to the Balfour Declaration. Anybody have any questions about those IDs? Can anybody tell me what the von Schlieffen Plan was?
Von Schlieffen.
Wasn't it Germans' plan for a two-front war?
Good. They're going to kind of throw a defensive force up against Russia to keep Russia from penetrating into Germany with war. And his main plan was to knock France out first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he was hoping to surprise the French by going through Belgium and coming down above Paris. And he kept saying, strengthen the right flank. Oh, when it was deathbed. He died before the war, and when the Germans did start war with France in 1914, they used a modified version of the von Schlieffen Plan. They did not strengthen the right flank quite as much as he wanted them to because they were fearful of a French penetration into Germany. And so they kind of held back too many or put too many troops in the middle of the frontier with the French. And the other thing about the von Schlieffen Plan is that him calling to go through Belgium is very significant because Belgium's neutrality was guaranteed by England. And England had been sitting on the sideline when all this crisis of the summer of 1940 is going on. They're not committed to getting into the war. But when the Germans go through Belgium and violate Belgium's neutrality, that is enough to get the British off the fence, and they go ahead and enter into the war as well. So the arrival of British troops really scared. There, go ahead. Thank you, Michael. So the fact that the British come in, prevent the Germans from knocking out the French very quickly, that leads to a prolongated war, and that 4-year war in Europe is just devastating. Everything, the whole rest of the century is going to be fouled up by it. So I kind of went on at length there, even though y'all hadn't had any questions, but it is a fascinating topic to me. Do y'all have any ideas, any questions on the Battle of the Marne versus the Battle of the Somme? Any of these ideas you need help with?
I could use just a little bit more clarification for the Battle of the Marne.
So the Battle of the Marne is that it's about 20 miles from Paris. It's at the beginning of the war, and the Germans get there, but the French stop them. I mean, the Germans have blown all through the French defenses in the opening month of the war, and they are poised to take out the French capital. They're poised to capture Paris. But at the Battle of the Marne, the French were able to stop the Germans. The Germans withdrew a little bit to kind of get their forces consolidated. And during that time of rest, you might say, the French began to dig their trenches and set up a defensive parameter for Paris and elsewhere. And that's the beginning of trench warfare. So the Battle of the Marne, the fact that the Germans were not able to get all the way to Paris is what will ultimately lead to this elongated war of attrition that will last for 4 years, more than 4 years. Battle of the Somme takes place in 1916. It lasts about 6 months. It's a huge battle between mostly English forces and German forces in the northern part of France. Each side has about 500,000 casualties, and the battle is inconclusive. I believe the English gained a little bit of ground, a few miles, but that was it. They could not penetrate any further, so both sides are losing unbelievable number of casualties without being able to overwhelm the other. And that is, of course, as a result of the use of machine guns and barbed wire and very complicated trench systems that provide great benefits to defensive war. And that's why this war becomes so long and so devastating, and they just rack up an enormous amount of expenses over the next 4 years, squandering the wealth of Europe on the what are called Flanders fields. Did that help you on those two? The difference between the Battle of the Marne and the Battle of the Somme?
Yeah.
Okay, good. There are other huge ones like Battle of Verdun, which is also taking place in 1916, last 9 months. Again, that time was a German offensive trying to break through yet again and to take over Verdun. And it lasted again about 9 months. And again, about 1 million casualties for naught. All right, any other ideas in there that you need me to have a quick look at? It wasn't clear in the video? So you look at an idea like Fume and Sudetenland. Those two IDs have to do with the territorial changes that took place at Versailles. At Versailles is this huge peace conference, and they're trying to sort out everything about Europe, come up with new maps of Europe, because the Russian, German, and Austrian empires are now away. And so we have this effort to establish new countries based on ethnicity. But this new map making of Europe that took place at Versailles had some significant problems that helped set the stage for what happens. For instance, the Sudetenland. Can anybody tell me what the Sudetenland was?
It was a mountainous area on the edge of Czechoslovakia. It was considered, considered a strategic place in case of war.
Between whom?
Oh gosh, Germany and the Czechs, I guess.
Good job. And so at Versailles, when they were drawing a map for Czechoslovakia, what did they do about Sudetenland? Did it go, well, here, I'll go ahead and take it a little bit further. What you want to know, it's a long-term traditional German population lives in those mountains. At Versailles, the map makers decided to give Sudetenland to Czechoslovakia so that they will have a defensible border. So that means you got a whole bunch of German people living in a new Czechoslovakian country. That will be a great irritation to the Germans, who feel like this is, for them, it's like going back to, the 1600s, when they would lose a population to another country. And so it was a source of national, anger over this. And Adolf Hitler will use the issue of the Sudetenland all during his 1930s to complain about the League of Nations. And then in the fall of 1938, with the Munich crisis, he uses the issue of the Sudetenland to divide his enemies and threaten war. So that's why the Sudetenland is important. Did you happen to get Fume, what Fume was?
Probably got it wrote down here. I got these ID cards, kind of like a Quizlet thing, but they're written down, and they're really a pain to dig through.
This will just help you get your head concentrated as you begin to think about the test this week.
I'm not finding one for that.
Anybody got Fume? I'll go ahead and tell you real quick, then. I'm going to take you to a different part of Europe, go down a little bit further south to Italy, and go up to the top right-hand corner of Italy. And beyond that is a whole area called the Balkans. It's got the Slovenian people, the Croatians, the Bosnians, Albanians, Serbs, etc. Fume had a majority, kind of a split population between Italians and Slovenians. And at the League of Nations, when they were making the map of this new Yugoslavia, they put Fume in Yugoslavia, to the great irritation of Italy. In fact, Italy, time and time again at Versailles, was denied any kind of winnings from the war. The French and the British took up the mandates of, they basically took over all the Ottoman land and drew the maps of Iraq and Lebanon, Jordan, Palestine, and they took them and made mandates out of them, and the Italians got nothing. And the French and British divided the German colonies in Africa among themselves. So this issue of even fume. So the issue of fume not being included in Italy at the end of the war just really discredited the Italian government when the Versailles Treaty was over. The Italian people are like, how in the world could you not get anything for us during the Versailles Treaty negotiations? And it was one of the reasons it helped lead to the fall of the Italian government. Mussolini will make great issue of this thing, fume, in his rise to power. And one of the early things he does in the 1920s is to seize fume from Yugoslavia in a military exercise. And by doing so, he gets a lot of good popularity, good points. He scores many good points in the Italian press for having secured for Italy what the previous government could not do by negotiation. So these issues of land and people and national pride and the problems of Versailles and how are they going to make sense of all this, that's what it's all about. In the long run, the Versailles Treaty does not work. There's just too many problems with it. And as a result, we get World War II. And we also get the rise of fascist powers in Germany and Italy out of irritation of the Versailles Treaty, which leads, of course, ultimately to World War II. So that's why we focus a lot on the mistakes and difficulties of the Versailles Treaty, because the next war will have 80 million dead and bring Europe to its knees. So that's why all of these IDs kind of fit in. I know they're just one word, one city, but what you want to see is the larger structure of how it fits into what's going on in Europe and why it's significant. Anybody else have any IDs in that section? I know I brought those up myself, but the next section is on the Russian Revolution and then the coming of the communist Bolsheviks, beginning with Nicholas II and going to the Comintern. Does anybody have any questions about that ID, those IDs?
Can we go over Vladimir Lenin and the peace, land, and bread thing?
Sure. So this has to do with the Communist Party of Russia, which has existed since probably the 1880s. Marxism was very theoretical, and Marx had defined a series of stages that a country had to go through before the proletariat had reached consciousness, and that the population would be prepared for communism. And as the Communist Party looked at Russia in the 1890s and even into early 1900s, the strict Marxists didn't believe that Russia was anywhere near for a proletariat leadership because there wasn't enough proletariat yet. And so they thought Russia would have to wait until other countries like Germany had achieved the Marxist state, or pardon me, the communist state. But there was one group of Russian communists called the Bolsheviks, and they believed that actually the proletariat could be taught to understand class consciousness, and they didn't have to get there by generations of being ground down. And the one who emerged as a leader of the Bolsheviks is this ID, Vladimir Lenin. So he emerges as really, and by the way, one of the reasons he emerges is because of his theoretical abilities and his ability to make arguments in regard to the application of Marxist theory to Russia. Also, he's a good speaker and communicator. After the 1905 revolution, he is exiled. Many of his comrades are exiled into Siberia, people like Trotsky and Stalin. But Lenin ends up in London, where he manages a newspaper written in Russian, and which is published in London, but copies of it are shipped back to and smuggled into Russia. And over those years, between 1905 and 1914, Lenin really learns he really hones his ability as a written communicator. And also, he's living in London in 1914, 1915, 1916, and he's seeing how the English are using propaganda, the way that they are communicating with the public through mass media. So in April of 1917, he leaves England and comes to Russia because he can tell that Russia is about to go through this amazing transformation from autocratic imperial rule to a new form of government. And so when he arrives, and here's his part, peace, land, and bread. When he arrives in St. Petersburg in April 1917, he has arranged for the press to show up, and he gets off the train and he gives a speech. And he says, we will, because Russia's about to have elections for the first time. And so he's now trying to build a party that would attract the Russian people and that they would vote for him. And so he decides that he's got to come up with a slogan that would pull everybody in. And his slogan is peace, land, and bread. So his peace part is that he is calling for an immediate end of the war, for Russia to make terms with Germany and get out of the war because the war is crushing the people. Also land, he's talking about land that he wants to help the average small Russian farmer out in the countryside who's been suffering. And he knows he's got to reach out to them because they are such a huge part of the population. And then bread is a general idea of helping the Russian worker in the cities. So all during the summer of 1917 and into the fall of 1917, Vladimir Lenin is trying to build a mass political party that will be attractive to the Russian people. The irony is that he is actually not able to do it when they have an election in October 1917. The Bolsheviks come in nearly last. And it is after that election and the results of that election that the Bolsheviks decide to go with an armed rebellion and an armed takeover of the government. And they're like, well, democracy didn't work. The people don't want us, but the people need us, and we need to lead Russia into this, promised wonderful future based on socialism. And so they seize power in an uprising which lasts for years, and they finally win that civil war. So that's Vladimir Lenin, and he does eventually defeat. He puts together a coalition of socialist and left-leaning parties, along with his right-hand man Leon Trotsky and the Red Guards, and they win this civil war in Russia. And Vladimir Lenin sets up the first socialist communist government really in history. Interesting is that at the same time Lenin is putting together this socialist communist model in Russia, Benito Mussolini is in Italy on the other side building another new kind of political ideological arrangement called fascism, both of which are a result of the war having been so devastating to society and looking for answers. By the way, they both turn against democracy. And both of them turn towards authoritarian models. All right, anybody, hopefully, Isaac, that satisfies that question? Looks like I've got a, hold on one second, I've got a, looks like I've got a, all right. Oops, I lost Joel. Okay, where are we now then? So, anybody else have any ID questions from that section?
Is it Politburo? However.
Yeah,
Pronounce it.
Bureau. So when they make a new government in Russia, first of all, they're going to call it the United Socialist Soviet Republics, which we call USSR. And it's going to have a one party, only one political party can exist in Russia. And they actually do set up these things called all-party congresses. And on paper, it looks like democracies are going on. But here's what you want to know about the Politburo. The Politburo is the committee that controls the party. It's the party leadership. And when it comes down to it, it's whoever controls the Politburo that really controls the Soviet Union. Because the Politburo controls the party, and the party controls who's going to get in positions of government. And even though you have these elections going on, the people who are voting, which is a very limited number of people in Russia, they haven't determined who the candidates are going to be. The Politburo has made all the decisions. So what you want to come away with is the Politburo is this committee. It's the leadership of the Bolshevik Party, and by the way, there's one more thing to say about the Politburo. It has a general secretary, which means that's the leader or the chairman of the Politburo. And whoever is the chairman of the Politburo is the real leader of the whole Soviet Union. So Vladimir Lenin is going to be the head, he's going to be the chairman of the Politburo, which is going to give him control of Russia. So he won't be this figure who's been elected, nor does he make himself czar. He makes himself head of the committee that controls the party, and the party controls the state. When Vladimir Lenin dies of a stroke in about 1923, there'll be a power struggle between the rest of the Politburo to see who's going to replace him, because there's no clear-cut voting process. And so what happens is there's a fight between Leon Trotsky and Joseph Stalin. And you would have thought Trotsky would have won because of his military experience, but Trotsky, for a variety of reasons, Stalin manages to get the support of the majority of the committee, and he becomes the next general secretary of the Politburo, and therefore he is the head of the Soviet Union until his death in about 1956. So, and then from then on until the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, the head of the Soviet system is whoever is head of the Politburo. How's that? 4-minute summary of the Russian political system, or the Soviet political system. Anybody else have a question in that section on the what was going on with Russia and then the early Soviet Union? Now we're going to move on to fascism. And that section begins with Benito Mussolini and goes all the way through the Locarno Pact. It's more than just the rise of fascism. It also has to do with the interwar period and the difficulty of the maintaining the Versailles security system. Anybody have any questions in this next section?
What exactly do you want us to come away with the Fascist Party?
Oh, well, you know, you need to go back. I don't know if people are either A, not watching the video lectures I put up there, or B, aren't paying that much attention to it. But the Fascist Party is this new model ideology that Benito Mussolini creates after, right in the wake of World War I. Prior to the war, Benito Mussolini had been a socialist. Therefore, he favored government ownership of large sections of the economy, and that the economy would be run on behalf of the average worker. However, the problem with Benito Mussolini is he's also a nationalist, and he wants Italy to be able to assert itself both in Europe and also in the Mediterranean. And to assert yourself, you're going to have a strong military and a cohesive national population behind policies. He's got a problem on his hands. Socialism stresses class conflict, a conflict between the Italian worker and the Italian capitalists. But he knows that's not a winning combination. He's got to get the country together behind certain ideas. And so with the Fascist Party, he's going to say that we need policies that solve the economic issues here at home that have been this problem of the workers not being treated well and the wealth all being, concentrated in the hands of a few. But he also says that democracy, here's the other thing I'm going to write down about the fascist. He says democracy is not going to work. Democracy is not a good tool for national progress because the country is too divided, and party politics leads to all this sniping at one another. It tears us apart. We've got to unify. He says Italy needs to be led by a great leader, Il Duce, the Duke, somebody who can make decisions on the country, bring the country together, solve the problems between capital and labor, build up a strong military, and assert Italy's interest in the international arena. And he says, I am that man. And so the Fascist Party is going to be, he's going to develop a whole bunch of followers. He's going to reach out to a lot of veterans from World War I who were homeless and jobless and had military experience. He gets them organized. He goes around and starts giving them great speeches. And he also introduces strong-arm methods. He develops a group called the Black Shirts. In fact, he's got all of his fascists wear black. And they go around with the weapons, and they go around with a military element to how they operate, and a real, almost they look like a gang in some respects, as far as like carrying clubs and knives and chains, and they would brawl it out with the Communist Party of Italy. In fact, I'll say this also about the fascists. Benito Mussolini says we do not want to become communist because the communists insist on getting rid of all of our traditional culture of Italy. The communists are against traditional families and traditional marriage. The communists are against our Christian heritage. So for Mussolini, he's like, you're destroying the national identity if you go down the path of communism. So he puts forward communists as the greatest threat to the Italian people. And he says that only we, the Fascist Party, can protect us, our national history and our identity as a people from the communists who will destroy everything. Eventually, he gets the support of the property people because it looks like the only thing that's going to stop communism, which was growing in the elections in Italy in 1919, 1920, is somebody like Benito Mussolini. So behind the scenes, conversations take place, and they decide, let's put Benito Mussolini in power as chancellor, or premier, I think it was called. And that could be done if the king of Italy, who was kind of a figurehead king in many respects, there was something in the Constitution where the king could name a new premier. And so King Victor Emmanuel II, following the March on Rome, which made it look like the people of Rome, people of Italy, were calling for the fascists to deliver them, Benito Mussolini and all these fascist followers march all the way to Rome, and there's this big meeting between the king and Benito Mussolini. They come out of the meeting, and the king has announced that he has made Benito Mussolini his new premier, and he will be forming a government. And that is how the fascists came to power in Italy. It was out of a fear of communists taking over and deciding which one are we going to go with, an authoritarian, hot-headed, strange figure named Benito Mussolini, or are we going to allow the communists to emerge? And Italian property people decided that they would go with Mussolini. And once Mussolini got in power, he got rid of the Communist Party. He jailed them. He destroyed their presses. He forbade them from having any more campaigning, things like that. So that's the development of fascism in Italy in a nutshell. And other countries begin to watch this model, and you see, follow-ons in other countries beginning to take a page out of Mussolini's book. And by the way, to say taking the page out of Mussolini's book, I would recommend to you that Mussolini also took his page out of Napoleon Bonaparte's playbook. And today, Vladimir Lenin has taken taken pages from Mussolini's playbook and Napoleon's playbook. And this is how you emerge and govern in a country that is deeply divided. So there's that. Now, all of this is in my video lectures, and it's not really my idea to re-teach it. I don't think you all want me to do that right here now, but I am happy to clarify things. Anybody else have an ID from this section?
I think I'm good with this section.
All right, cool. Going up to the top of the next page, do self-stressman, policy of fulfillment, the Carnot Pact. Anything in there? Or should we now go on to Germany with the rise of the Nazi Party? So from Paul von Hindenburg to the Evian Conference, do y'all have any questions? You need clarification on any of those IDs?
I think I'm good through there.
You think you're good, Isaac?
Yeah.
This next section, Kellogg-Briand Pact, Geneva Conference, Representing Kings, Spanish Civil War, all of that has to do with the immediate origins, the things that took place in the 30s that led to World War II and the early stages of World War II. When you get down to Vichy France, things like the Nazi-Soviet Pact, that takes us through about 1940, 41, where Adolf Hitler has shocked the world and taken over, he and his allies had taken over everything except for England and Spain. And then this next section leads through I would say that one stops at about Potsdam or Hiroshima, really. And those are all IDs having to do with World War II. So, any ID questions that we're getting into in this general vicinity of the lead up to World War II and World War II? Once I get through this, I'm going to go back and look at the test from last year and let you know which IDs students struggled with. I will tell you the ones where students, or where the class average was less than 75. But I want to make sure that I give you a chance to ask any questions about IDs that you try to master by watching the video lecture, but you still have questions about it. Does anybody have any remaining ID questions that you've got some information but you feel like you need more? Or you need some kind of clarification?
I could actually use some more information on the Munich Conference.
The Munich Conference. What do you have so far?
When Germany comes to Austria, France says that it's a violation of the Treaty of Versailles, but then Germany says, no, we're not going to do anything.
All right, that's called the Anschluss. That took place in March 1938. The French call it a violation. Germany says it's not. But what does the French do about it? Do they go to war with Germany over it? They don't. They're just here. So by this point in time, Adolf Hitler is seeing that while the French and other European states might be upset with how he's changing the map of Europe that was agreed to at the Versailles Treaty, he is now convinced that no one's going to actually go to war with him to stop it. So guess what he wants now? He wants the Sudetenland back. Remember that Sudetenland I was telling you about earlier, where Michael said it was the land between Czechoslovakia and Germany, but it was a mountainous region. It was mostly had been inhabited by Germans. Well, in summer of 1938, Adolf Hitler begins to move troops to the border of the Sudetenland in preparation for an invasion of that territory. That sparks a political crisis because the French are in a treaty with the Czechoslovakians that says in the event of war with Germany, if either one of us get attacked, the other one automatically has to help. And the French are like, gee whiz, we have to go to war with Germany if the Germans seize the Sudetenland. But the French don't want to go to war. The Great Depression's been going on. They've got unemployment of over 20%. They're really not in a position for war. So the Munich Conference, and here's where we are now on that, Tony. The Munich Conference is a meeting between Adolf Hitler and the British Prime Minister, the French President. Adolf Hitler wants to have a friendly face in the room, so he gets Benito Mussolini to come up. The president of Czechoslovakia is there, but he's not allowed to negotiate. What happens at the Munich Conference is the British and the French appease Adolf Hitler. To appease someone is to give in to someone who is ranting and raving and threatening, bullying. You give them what they want in order to calm things down. So at the Munich Conference, Adolf Hitler was told that Germany could take the Sudetenland and that France and England would not go to war with them over it, the president of Czechoslovakia is told, if I were you, I would not fight Germany over this because you'd be fighting by yourself. This is a peaceful solution to this issue. And Adolf Hitler promises that he won't do anything like this again. Neville Chamberlain, that ID below there, the Prime Minister of England, comes back to London and gets off the plane at Heathrow Airport and holds up a piece of paper and says, I've done it. I've secured peace for our time. Which goes down as a great irony because he does not secure peace for our time. But you can't totally blame him because England's on the other side of the English Channel, the French are in disarray, the Germans have rebuilt an army while the West slept. What are you going to do about it? And then, of course, Adolf Hitler ends up taking over the rest of Czechoslovakia, breaks the promises he made at Munich Conference. He does that in March and April of 1939. And then in the summer of 1939, he does the same movement against Poland. He begins to mass troops on the border of Poland, saying that the Danzig corridor, which was given to Poland at the Versailles Treaty, placed Germans in Poland. And he's going to now seize that territory. And that is the final straw when Adolf Hitler and the Germans invade Poland, September 1st and 2nd, 1939. England and France finally declare war on Germany. The Munich Conference is there in the middle. And the big lesson there is not to appease dictators. And that allies need to stand together against aggression. By the way, Munich Conference is October 1938. That would help you a little bit too. The Anschluss, the idea above it was March 1938. It had to do between Germany and Austria unifying, which was against the Versailles Treaty. And the Munich Conference has to do with Germany trying to seize Czechoslovakia's high mountain region. So there's that. Anybody else have an ID from this section? All the way to the end of World War II. Now we can look at the origins of the Cold War, from the Potsdam Conference to the Jupiter missiles, which has to do with the missile crisis, Cuban Missile Crisis, the Marshall Plan, the Berlin Airlift, NATO. Those are all gone over in good detail, I think, in the video lectures. But if you need any clarification, let me know. $55 minutes. I'm pulling up eLearn so I can have a look at the questions that didn't go well last semester. Anybody have any questions, remaining questions about those IDs before I start telling you which IDs, which questions were problematic last year? Any last ID questions?
Not off the top of my head.
Alrighty. Kenny, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Alright. So the class average last year on this test 3 was straight up 75%. It actually looks more like a curve than just about anything I've had. I will now walk through the ones where students scored less than 75%. So if you got your ID list, you can either take a pencil and put a star by it, you can underline it, you can use a highlighter, whatever you like. I'm going to talk about the ones with students that had less than 70%. The Cougar telegram was just sub 70%. So make sure you go back and look at that one again. 1905 revolution came in at 74%. The blank check, a little below 70%. Mine, you want to study all the IDs, but then you want to go back and make sure you have these. Battle of the Somme came in at 68%. So we talked about that one earlier. Battle of Gallipoli did not go well last year, 52%. The Zimmerman telegram, on the other hand, had a 95% correct rate. And all these next ones were good. Good run here. Until you get to Article X, or Article 10, which comes in at a 68%. Go back and look through that again. One good here. Nicholas II, problematic. Who is Nicholas II? Only 63% of students knew who Nicholas II was. Can any of y'all tell me who Nicholas II was? Who was an ID back at the beginning?
Shoot. He was the Tsar of Russia, wasn't he? Like one of the last ones.
There you go. You would get this question right. The question was the last Tsar of Russia. He and his family were shot by communists in 1918. Alexander Kerensky is also tripped people up. Only 58% of students got that. Of course, he led the provisional government for Russia in 1917. Leon Trotsky came in at 68%. Gustav Stresemann, the German foreign policy expert, came in at 63%. .95% got Neville Chamberlain correct. That's good. So the Kornilov affair, coming in at 63% of students got that right. The November Revolution, 63% got that right. The Spartacus revolt, much lower. Only 47% of students got the Spartacus revolt correct. The Ruhr crisis, only 58% got that right. The beer hall push, students struggle with that a bit too. Locarno Pact, also sub 70. Kellogg-Briand Pact, just almost reached 70%, but not quite. The Acerbo Law was problematic for students. That was that new law in Italy that gave, well, you can go back and look at it. Comintern, sub 60%, sub 60. Lebensraum, under the German plan, Hitler's plan to award the East to give Germans living room to grow. The Führer principle did not do well. His idea that only one man could solve all the problems of Germany, it was him. The Evian Conference came in at 58%. That had to do with the Jewish refugee crisis. The Geneva Conference, about the lowest score I've seen, even at 42%. That is addressed in one of the video lectures that talk about the interwar period and the rise of Nazi Germany, the rearmament of Germany. Spanish Civil War comes in at 68%. Ooh, can you believe this? I'm going to read a question to you. Y'all tell me the answer. You ready? Everybody still awake? I got 3 of you. So, at this event, Great Britain and France abandoned part of Czechoslovakia to Germany in hopes of preventing a general war. It proved to be short-sighted thinking when Germany seized the rest of Czechoslovakia in early 1939, despite Hitler's promises not to. What is that talking about? At this event, in late September 1938, Great Britain and France abandoned part of Czechoslovakia to Germany in hopes of preventing a general war. Munich Conference. Only 26% of students last year got that answer correct. It's kind of surprising, isn't it? But, they were grouped with the Evian Conference, Geneva Conference, Yalta Conference, Casablanca Conference, Potsdam Conference. You will need to spend some special time coming up with little things about each conference will help you remember it. For instance, the Evian Conference was about the Jewish refugee crisis. The Munich Conference was about Czechoslovakia and the Sudetenland and appeasing Hitler. The Geneva Conference was about Germany's declaration it would rearm and how the security apparatus of the League of Nations did nothing. The Yalta Conference has to do with post-World War II agreements on what Europe would look like after the war. And we begin to see problems between the Soviets and the United States over the issue of whether or not Eastern Europe would be independent and free after the war, or whether or not the Soviets would dominate those territories. So get all the conferences down. Here's a real strong section. I'm seeing lots of 80s and 90% until we get to Operation Barbarossa. 68%. Anybody know what Operation Barbarossa had to do with?
Wouldn't it prolong, I don't know what that was, a 3-pronged attack on Russia?
Yeah, very good. So that's really the beginning of the end of Adolf Hitler, after having made a neutrality deal with the Soviets so that he could take over all the West. Now he decides he's going to go against the Russians now too. And at first it looks like he's going to pull it off, but eventually he's trying to swallow too big of a prey. He kind of replays Napoleon's mistakes. Oh, this Bretton Woods Conference. That's that economic summit meeting in 1944 in the United States, the World Bank, and the IMF. Students struggle with the Yalta Conference. I've already mentioned that. The conferences are hard. Potsdam Conference, students have did well with that one. Looking good. A lot here now. Until we get to perestroika at the end. That ID, perestroika, which has to do with Gorbachev's reforms of the Soviet economy. Also glasnost, which has to do with Gorbachev's reforms of the political system of the Soviet Union, allowing more democracy. Jean Monet, who's considered the father of the European Union. Only about half the students got that right. Same thing for Clement Attlee, the British Prime Minister from the Labour Party. He created the social welfare system in England in the post-war period. Charles de Gaulle, the French leader. Students didn't do well on him. John Maynard Keynes, the economic philosopher who came up with the full employment economic theory. He needs a little help. Francois Mitterrand, the French, the socialist French president of the 1980s. Only 58% of students knew him. Margaret Thatcher, the conservative British Prime Minister from 1979 to 1990. She also, only 58% of students recognized her as that British Prime Minister. Jean-Marie Le Pen, the right-wing politician of France, who's anti-immigrant for the most part, and he is on your IDs. Only 37% of students recognized Jean-Marie Le Pen, and that was the last one. So all those ones that you have identified there got less than 70%. I hope this has helped. When do y'all think you're going to take the test? You got until Thursday.
I'm probably going to give myself as much time as possible to study and make sure I've got it, so I'm probably going to take it on Thursday.
Right, and y'all might go looking, like I mentioned earlier, for Brady's IDs, his flashcards.
I actually managed to find it earlier. Let's see if I can pull it up.